I gotta tell you something, man. So in getting ready for this, I had not heard of and I discovered models,
Yeah.
and I'm so fucking fascinated. Like fascinated by it. Fascinated by it in so many ways, like in so many layers. This was your first book, and I just want to make sure I read. It's Models Attract Women Through Honesty, right?
Yep. Yep.
And I was like, oh, this is like interesting. So I started reading it, and I was so many things hit me. Number one was how I so wish that when I was 15, 16, 17, that I had this book to
Yeah.
read it, and how I feel like it would have changed my life. And also at 18 and 19 and 20 and 21 and 22. And then some of the lessons that because I started reading it, just absolutely captivated by it. I go like, oh, I learned, I feel like I figured out this at 36 or something, or
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
it really, and also the fact that still one of my favorite things to do is have a conversation with a guy who's single or going on a date, and just hear his dating stories, and hear the psychology, hear his approach, hear what happened. It's endlessly fascinating to me. Attraction, dating. I mean, I'll watch a dating show, especially like the more realistic it is, like a reality show, but not where it's like, just to watch people like yell and scream at each other, but to see somebody go on. I love that world. And I
Yeah.
feel like you in this book break down something that is, again, I don't know why we ignored it for years, which was, part of it was just cultural, that we were raised, or men were raised to be like stoic or macho or, flashy, like all that generation. And now things have evolved into, no, be vulnerable and try to connect. How in the fuck did you get to writing and you wrote that, what, 10 plus years ago?
Yeah. 2011.
Dude. I mean,
I mean, so I definitely, so I have a weird history with that world. Like,
mhm.
so I was that guy, the whole pickup artist thing happened back in the mid 2000s or whatever. And
Yeah.
I was in high school and college when all that was going on. And so I kind of like fell into that little world, and, cause I was the dweeby guy who couldn't get a girl to like me and all that
Yeah.
stuff. And so I started reading a lot of those books and digesting it and trying it out. And it was funny because some of it, quote unquote worked, it was like,
Mhm.
it would get me a date or get me laid or whatever, but it just felt awful. Like it felt I felt like a car salesman. And it took me a long time to kind of like put my finger on like why it felt awful. And it was just, it's essentially, it's like, most men's dating advice, and a lot of women's, but not all women's, but most, like 99% of men's dating advice up until about 10 years ago was very like status obsessed. It was all about like, all right, you want to be the dude with a Ferrari and like the champagne bottles at the club, but you're broke. So here are like 8 things you can do to make girls think you're the guy with the Ferrari in the bottles at the club. And it's like that is so pathetic on like so many levels. Like it's just very dehumanizing
that advice is like, here's how you can deceive people and get them you can manipulate them through these series of lies.
Yeah.
Like,
so
that's the advice.
It's essentially, it's setting you up for failure, because it's essentially just teaching toxic manipulation to people. It's also dehumanizing for the man himself, because it's kind of reinforcing this bad belief that like a man is only worth like how much money he has, or how many girls he sleeps with. It's bad for the women because it encourages men to continue to objectify women and treat them as, trophies and objects and stuff. So it was just, it's a mess all the way around. And so it was funny because I kind of, dipped my toe into that world and was very dissatisfied with it. And I just became fascinated with like, why is this so dissatisfied? Like why, I was like 22 and I'm like, well, I'm actually getting laid now, but I'm less happy than I was when I was like the dorky guy who couldn't get a date. I just feel like it's because all the relationships I had were so dysfunctional and so toxic. And so,
but I think one of the things about you though is just at 22 recognizing that. I feel like most people, myself included, would have just been like, well, I mean, I'll just keep doing this, like, even if it doesn't feel good.
Yeah. Well, and what I noticed too is that like the other guys in that world felt the same way, but they just blame the women. They're like, oh, well, it's
Right.
women are like, they're crazy and
Yeah.
they're selfish and they'll use you for things and stuff. And so it became like super sexist, and that didn't feel very good either. So yeah, I just kind of like started probing like why, where is the dysfunction in this? And by that time I had started my blog and I was writing a lot about dating relationships, and I was getting emails from a lot of guys around the world with their situations and stuff. And I just slowly started kind of piecing together like what a healthy relationship is. And there is a lot of advice out there that's kind of directed towards women about what a healthy relationship is, but nobody, when you go to like your random dude in 2010, you're like, hey bro, you got to be more vulnerable. Like the guy's going to laugh in your face. Like he's going to think you're a joke. And so I kind of took it on myself as a challenge to, how can I write this stuff in a way that like doesn't emasculate the male reader, like that it shows a guy like you can be a emotionally healthy individual and respect yourself and respect women, but still be a dude. Like you don't have to like be a wishy-washy, you don't have to like cry during Pixar movies to like.
Was that a challenge though? Was that a challenge to be able to communicate that idea?
It was, and it's funny because I kind of wrote models. When I was writing it, I was like, I'm very confident that like this is the way to be like a good person, and this is what this industry needs. But I'm done with these people. Like I can't do this anymore, and so I'm going to write this book. I'm going to put it out there, and if it changes the narrative or changes the discussion, then great. Or I'm just going to be laughed out of the room, and fuck it, whatever. That's fine too.
Yeah.
And initially I was laughed at quite a bit. Like a lot of people in that world thought it was a joke. They're like, can you believe this guy? He's telling people to be sissies and be vulnerable and be like, open up their emotions and stuff. And it took a couple years to catch on. But I'd say by like 2013, 2014, it was the best-selling men's dating book on Amazon. And I think it pretty much has been ever since.
That's crazy. I mean, yeah, it made sense that I wasn't aware of it when it came out because I wasn't dating. But I mean, I just started to read that and I was like, oh man, I was just thinking back to like how insecure and lost I was, like in dating. I didn't know what the fuck I was doing. And I was, kind of an introvert and just totally insecure. And then you run into like that dating advice that they were like, you got to insult them, kind of be like, what's up with your fucking teeth? And then she'll like you. And you're like, oh, that's real cool. And then people be like, yeah, that works. I'm like, yeah, I can't do that, man. I don't know how to do that. That's not for me.
Doesn't feel right.
No, that what you wrote was like, oh, it feels like things that, again, like as I've gotten older, you're like, yeah, that's just, you mean be a person, treat them like people, show, like be. I love everything about also, because you look back on it when you were like, you go like, what was so undesirable about me? And you're like, oh, it was all my neediness. Like I was just like this needy mess.
Yes.
Without even recognizing it,
Yeah, totally. And it's, part of my inspiration when I wrote that was very similar. I wrote it when I was 27 and I'd kind of gone through this whole journey, and been through all these disastrous relationships. And so I kind of looked at myself and I was like, okay, what do I wish 18-year-old Mark Like
Would know.
what
Yeah.
write the book that I wish 18-year-old Mark picked up and read instead of like the game. You know?
Yeah. The game.
And so that's what I went for.